Welcome to the show. I am your host, Todd Dallas Lamb, and you're listening to On the Clock. On the Clock is a venture with the Strategos Podcast Network, where we feature an array of guests to dive into all things education. We hope you enjoy. Welcome back to On the Clock. My name is Todd Dallas Lamb, and our guest today is the Pittsburgh Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Anthony Hamlet. How are you today, Dr. Hamlet? We are honored to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad I got the chance to get on the show. I know you've been trying to get me on here for a minute, so glad I could take time for it.
We worked pretty hard. We aggressive to get the best superintendents in the country on our show. We've had about 9 folks last year, and then you are one of our first in the new year. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to dive into your background, but also want to talk about what's going on in Pittsburgh with regards to kids coming back. And my understanding is they're coming back on the 6th of April full time, even though you've had a few stops and starts.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the very beginning of this school year, we have been prepared and ready with our buildings for in-person learning for our students. However, without citing an abundance of caution, our board voted to stay remote based on the county and the state being substantial. So right now we're back in the moderate phase, and we're looking forward to students coming back. So we're physically distanced, and some of the things that have come up as a result of us coming back, we've gotten questions in light of the last information that has the CDC changes that have come out about 3 foot. We are holding solid at 6 foot distancing. All of our schools, all of our office buildings are set up for 6 foot. We're going to stay with that out of an abundance of caution. We're going to stay in that 6 foot range for right now.
What were you doing for the last year? How did you educate your students in Pittsburgh?
Well, I'll tell you, when this pandemic first closed our buildings down, and just like many districts around the nation, we weren't ready. We were not a one-to-one district. Right. We had aspirational goals as a district and to become one-to-one within the next 2 or 3 years. Obviously, COVID has put that in the hyperdrive.
Right.
And so we were able to, thank goodness, we were able to secure enough computers for our students to begin the school year. So we started the school year, did a large engagement survey with our families to find out what families needed, our students needed computers, and what students needed internet access. And so we began to support the students and families who needed the internet access based on need. Then in January, we began the transition into being one-to-one. Being one-to-one district is that every Pittsburgh public school student has a Pittsburgh public school computer or device.
What were the percentage of families in Pittsburgh that neaded a device? That you had, did you have any rough numbers on what that looked like?
Wow, I would say of our 23,000 families, at least 2/3 needed internet access and needed computers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have 23,000 students in your district.
Yes.
And roughly about 15 or 14,000 needed both a device and internet access.
Yes, there were about, I think, about 5,000 total households or families that needed the internet access.
So that raises a lot of questions, right? Like, so
absolutely.
Not only do you need those 2 things, you probably need some help in. Look, my 15-year-old son helps me set up my computer and my music all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So like, how do you help get these families locked and loaded with technology and IT help?
Yeah, well, thank goodness we had a great we have a great IT department that was ready and to mobilize and really pivot when needed to meet the needs of our families. And so we set up sessions. We did a plethora of videos. We trained our office individuals as well around some of the basics that could be problems to troubleshoot. We did frequent FAQs around these frequently asked questions around having technology issues and how to remedy them. So we really tried to put as much information out there as we could to support that, but also be available to families who need to call in. And also our IT department created drop-in centers where families could drop in if they were just having that difficult a time with technology. they can sit in front of a tech person and really work through that process to make sure that technology was working.
So one of the things that's curious to me, and I've been having this conversation with folks around the country, is do you have a sense of your 23,000 students, and you have a dead certain date of kids coming back on April 6th? How many of them are coming back, and how many of them are not coming back and relying on the technology for whatever reason that might be?
So I think basically you're asking me like what students are coming back in person and which ones are choosing to stay online.
Yes. Yep.
Right now, so this is the process we went through. Our board, based on the resolution that they passed, wanted us to come back in a need-based in phases. So basically, we came up with this criteria. The criteria included, but not limited to, first and second quarter grades for our students, attendance as well, attendance data, also social emotional learning survey data. Also, there's an additional weight added for our ELL students, English language learner students, students who had IEPs, students who had 504s, and also our McKinney-Vento students as well. They had an extra weight added for them in that formula. And so based on that formula, we came up with 4 tiers. The highest tier being tier 4, that was the highest need. That group is coming back first. Roughly, there's about 5,000 students in tier 4. And then 2 weeks later, tier 3 will come, and there's about 4,500 students in tier 3. And then tiers 1 and 2 will return on May the 3rd. Now, when it comes to, I don't have the exact numbers when it comes to those students who will stay online, but I can tell you they're by and large, I would say, if I had to venture to say, about 1/3 of those students will stay online.
One of the things that has been really interesting to hear when I talk to superintendents is the number of homeless students. You mentioned McKinney-Vento. That's education speak for homeless students, correct?
Correct.
And how many do you have of your 23,000 students? How many do you have in Pittsburgh?
We have roughly about 1,500 displaced families right now.
Yep. Incredible. And I can only imagine the intense difficulty that you have with all the things we just talked about, right? Like, how do you get computers?
Right.
How do you get data access to families that are displaced, moving around from place to place, from day to day, week to week?
Well, early on, years ago, and I'm saying years ago, I've been in Pittsburgh now for 5 years. Amazing.
Right.
Time flies when you're having fun. But we created a McKinney-Vento office as an extension of our student support services division, to really focus on who are those kids, what supports do they need, and how can we get those resources to them. So we were already prepared to really work with and support our homeless students, and but also make sure we have those connections and working with those homes that they're in. They may be in foster care at someone's house or with a family, or they may be in a residential program and haven't got placement. So we have connections with all those organizations, all those families, making sure that our homeless students have what they need to really succeed.
So now let's pivot forward to you. We are starting back in Pittsburgh now. We've got kids coming back in. What are some of the challenges that you're dealing with reentry?
So some of the things you think about is kind of somewhat of back end infrastructure things. Number one, now that kids, just as an idea, probably layman's wouldn't think about this. People who are not in the industry wouldn't think about this, but just kids bringing computers. Now you have all those students and the teachers that have computers. What about power outages? What about power access, right? To charge the devices. Thinking about that. Also, another issue for us is transportation. We've been out for over a year now, and we don't actually have transportation in the district. We contract out with outside providers to provide transportation. And so some of those smaller mom and pop transportation companies have gone out of business, and that impacts transportation and our students coming back as well. But we have enough transportation right now. We've ramped up. We supported some of them as they stayed open, and we're ready to go, really. And so that's the most important thing. But also, important thing is emphasizing as well social distancing. It's going to be difficult. Students haven't been in person for I don't know how long. Teachers haven't been in person for I don't know how long, and really, really promoting and doubling down on social distancing, do not congregate and eat lunch together. Just those things that will really keep us safe and lessen exposures in the building. So those are some of the things that keep me up at night.
I would think that has to keep you up at night. How do you keep a 15-year-old kid and look them in the eye and say, okay, do not congregate? 15-year-olds in America are playing sports, right? Mm-hmm. And they're probably in soccer leagues and football. Mm-hmm. Is football active right now in Pittsburgh?
Yeah. We kept our sports going. So we had all of our sports seasons thus far.
So how do you say that? Like, honestly, you played football. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Mm-hmm. But how do you tell a football player in your high school, hey, you're banging into this running back 5 times a day in practice, but when you get to lunch, do not get close to your schoolmates? How does that work?
Our principals and our faculty and staffs in our buildings have to double down and really talk to the students about the impact of, where we are, what we're trying to accomplish, but also what's going to keep them safe. Right now, I can tell you all of our buildings are socially distanced. That's down to the classrooms, that's down to the offices, that's also in the cafeterias as well. So normally, actually, some of our schools have taken out those long tables that you normally would see in the cafeteria and replaced them with actual desks. Yep. Right, really separate out desks so kids can really be spaced out and sit individually. So a lot of that's in place, and our principals and admin staff have been creative in that, and really leaning on them to really articulate the importance of us following the protocols to their students and also faculty and staff as well.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean, April 6th is coming. You got Easter coming. Folks are all going to gather, and then kids start coming back to school. I mean, you have to be excited about renewing some normalcy back in Pittsburgh.
Oh my gosh, we're ultra excited right now. Yeah. I told people like clear my all my meetings for next week. I want to go visit schools. I want to see kids. I want to see teachers. And so I want to try to get to as many schools as I can. But another thing is also we're excited about. Number one, our kids are returning to in-person learning. But also we were able to vaccinate I would say by and large of our 4,500 personnel, about 3,800 have been vaccinated that we know of, right? So what happened is that, thank goodness for President Biden's push on prioritizing educators, that pushed that down to our governors. Governor Wolf from Pennsylvania quickly pushed it out and prioritized about 1,400 teachers that met the criteria. So in one location, we have 1,400 teachers receiving the Johnson & Johnson vaccination. Also, thanks to our Mayor Peduto in his office for referring Giant Eagle. Giant Eagle on a Friday, Giant Eagle calls our mayor's office, explained that they want to support and begin to work with school districts. Mayor's office referred them to us, and we quickly created this partnership with Giant Eagle. And within the next, from that Friday to the next Thursday, we had a mass vaccination set up at Heinz Field. And so on the first day of that, we had 1,500 faculty, staff, but also one of the things you want to do is support the community as well. And so anyone who wanted to be vaccinated of our staff, they had an opportunity. But also we extended this to our out of school time partners who work with our children, our learning hub as well, but also our contractors who come into our buildings. So we wanted everyone who worked with Pittsburgh Public School students or in our buildings and our offices to have a chance to be vaccinated if they could. So we're excited about that.
I oftentimes think that some of these moments in life are educational and actually can lead to improvement. And we've had lots of conversations on our podcast about with folks like yourself, chief academic officers, how the day will come when we will look back and say that there's been some improvement based on what has largely been kind of a disaster with regards to the pandemic. But parents learning how to connect their kids to the internet, learning from their computers, that has to lead to some improvement. I also think, as you've mentioned, and I think wisely you've mentioned the leadership from President Biden, your mayor, and your governor. Don't you think that this has been a bit of a civics lesson for people in America to learn how the system works, how the money comes from the federal government, but it flows down to the states. The money flows to the cities. Learning how government works is always good, right?
Listen, civic engagement,
Yep.
understanding about our democracy, how our economy works, how our democracy works is ultra important because, again, the reason why we're the greatest democracy in the world is that we are tasked to educate all of our students, irregardless if you were just coming as an immigrant or if you were born into this nation. We are tasked as public educators to educate all students to the best of our ability and with equity embedded in that as well. So that's what makes it so great. And to your point, it is a civics lesson. We can look at several things that happened in this past year. That could be civics lessons, social justice lessons when you talk about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others about that social justice. Also about how you really advocate for change and realizing that your vote does count. And ultimately, if we vote in mass, and the reason why your vote counts so importantly is around the nation right now, making sure our children understand how we have these particular groups or parties that are pushing to change voting rights in certain areas because they lost election seats, realizing that that's undemocratic. It's not democratic at all. And so having them understand and learn what that is and the impact of that is ultra important.
So one of the things that I'm always fascinated in, no kid ever grew up in America saying that I want to become the superintendent of a district. Right? It just doesn't happen. Yeah, I'm always fascinated how that happens. You have a very unique background. You grew up in Florida and you played football. Tell me about where you grew up and how what was your track through college?
So listen, I was born into a not so affluent area. So we had our challenges and things that were going on. But early on, again, born and raised in Delray Beach, Florida, Palm Beach County. So went to Atlantic High School, had an opportunity to get an athletic scholarship to the University of Miami and played football. And I went there at probably the best time to be at University of Miami.
Yes, Why? You did.
In my 5 years, we won 3 national championships, only lost 4 games, never lost a home game. And it was just an amazing run, great team, and a lot of lessons that I learned as a result. Of going into leadership, go back to the football field, Reentry practice field with Jimmy Johnson, Coach Johnson, but Coach Erickson and all the staff, and just learning lessons from them around being a team player.
Who was your high school coach? I imagine that person made an influence.
Wow. My first high school coach was Coach Dr. Edward Harris. Unfortunately, he's passed away. That was one of my mentors. Also, we had Leonard Mitchell, who's still around and still a big part of my life. Also, Steve Petty, my last 2 years, was my head football coach as well.
I mean, that for my listeners, and we always Anthony, I always like to talk about either fast food or movies or sports. And so you're definitely
got the sports.
You're crushing sports for me right now. I feel like, if we're really serious about football in America, you're from Florida, the Palm Beach area. I know that region produces a lot of actual Division I players. You're now in Pittsburgh, which is also one of the great recruiting hotbeds of football. I mean, if we're really serious about something, and in America, I think we are serious about football, we get our back up a little bit, don't we? The coaches aren't afraid to yell at people. Kids who come from difficult family life kind of need it, don't they?
And I think by and large, kids from all different walks of life need that in their life at some point. And realizing that yes, coaches yell, some do, some don't, but that constructive criticism, that feedback, and the need for change, but also in these team sports, which is so important, understanding everybody has a role. Do your role to the best of your ability. That's going to make the team do well. That's why we want to play.
Here's a debate I've heard. I know what I think. Is the key to football outside contain or do your job?
So outside contain, maybe doing your job. It depends on what.
All right, I love it.
It depends on what scheme of defense you're playing.
Yep.
In some plays I have outside contained. In some plays I have to spill it to the outside, the linebacker floor, and get it. So it just depends on the play.
Well, so isn't that the same? I mean, as you are now managing an urban district, I believe it's an urban district. It's 53% African American. It's urban, a city in America. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a role of managing a chief academic officer, an assessment director. You have people that are in charge of security. I mean, do your job must mean a lot when it comes from somebody like you, talking about what you've done as a national champion football player and bringing that leadership skill to your district leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, what's great is, again, in my trajectory and moving up through the ranks in education, and just know, my first job or position in public school education, I was a substitute teacher. Yep. So they can tell you that you can start from the very bottom and work your way up if you stay focused, you stay committed, and you want to quest for change. But basically, in my trajectory, the lessons learned in football, also becoming a dean of students, becoming a assistant principal, becoming a principal. All what I've learned when it comes from sports about team players and understanding people have to do their job, but also they need to understand the greater whole as well, and also the importance of their job in the greater whole to make their organization successful.
It's so great. All right. So final big question. Mm-hmm. I mentioned we have a couple topics, non-education. Mm-hmm. I once had a Primanti Brothers burger in Pittsburgh. Where are you on that thing? And what is your favorite dive fast food grub in Pittsburgh? Oh. Give our listeners some sense of where they should check into if they're in the city.
Oh, wow. I will tell you, Pittsburgh is a foodie town.
Yes, it is.
We have a lot of great restaurants that are around Pittsburgh, and it's tough to choose just one. I mean, there's so many diverse flavors and palates that are here in Pittsburgh that you can draw from. But I will tell you, Primanti Brothers, I've been said, I'm just saying this from even the locals, that it somewhat is overrated. It's somewhat of a novelty. But they stay busy. I'm not one for French fries on my sandwich. So I'm going there a couple times. I told them to put my French fries on the side. Yeah. Right? But some people love it. I mean, even in Pittsburgh, they have French fries on salads. So it's a little different. But that's their thing. French fries on salads and sandwiches and pierogies.
Oh my God. What a great city. And it really is a technology city. There's a lot of education technology that comes out of Pittsburgh. I don't know that a lot of people think like that, but one of my first clients in the whole industry of education came out of Pittsburgh, and ed tech is a big deal there.
Yeah, ed tech is where we are right now. And so just a little bit about Pittsburgh. Years ago, one of the main reasons that Pittsburgh is considered a major American town is because it was the hub of actually putting infrastructure and buildings into America. They were the mecca of the steel industry in the United States. So basically, they built America. And so over time, the population has dwindled because the steel industry has gone by the wayside. And so maybe it's 5% here now in the Pittsburgh region. And so at that point, they've gone through a renaissance, going from steel and that industry, going to tech, going to medicine and education. We have 9 major universities in the Pittsburgh region. I think 5 or 6 in the city alone as well. And so it's about education, but also there's a burgeoning, to your point, there's a burgeoning presence of tech companies that are here in Pittsburgh, and more are coming on a regular basis.
All right. Favorite football movie of all time?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you got me off guard.
Because you got me thinking now, the Tom Cruise movie, All the Right Moves, is right up the road from you. In Beaver, is it Beaver Falls?
Yeah, Beaver
Falls. Where Joe Namath was the quarterback?
Yeah, Beaver Falls, yeah. Wow, that's a tough one. I would say maybe The Longest Yard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or you can go back and be kind of sentimental and sing Brian's song.
Oh,
Brian.
I loved that movie.
Yeah,
my dad, whenever that movie came on, my dad, who played football, he was all-state football player in Ohio. We had to watch the Brian Piccolo, Gale Sayers story, and Gale Sayers was a hero in my family because what a lovely guy. I would have loved to have met that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got to throw this one in as well. The good old Bobby Boucher.
We can do it. Anthony Hamlet, you are awesome. Thank you for joining us. How can folks out there who are listening to our show today get a hold of you on social media, whether it be LinkedIn or Twitter?
On LinkedIn, you can just look up Dr. Anthony Hamlet. That's easy enough to find me. I'm prominent on LinkedIn, but on Twitter, you can reach me at PGH Souped, SUPT, Hamlet, HAMLET.
Definitely give Dr. Anthony Hamlet some love for this great interview he did today. And we thank you again for being on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to the next time you have me.
You got a deal.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of On the Clock. If you want to learn more about the show, please visit www.strategosgroup.com. Please consider subscribing on your podcast streaming platform so you don't miss out on our next episode. And until next time, I'm Todd Dallas Lamb, signing off.